Good morning and grand rising. Welcome to Wake Up with Sonia Poulton and guests. It is exactly 9 a.m. British summertime. I'm in London. My name is Sonia Poulton. The name is on the tin, right? How are you? I hope you're all right. It's Friday. Yes, it's Friday. I'm so happy. I'm so very happy. Welcome to Wake Up, the show that recognizes things are seldom what governments or legacy media tell us they are, which is why we inject a healthy dose of cynicism into any news of international events. That doesn't mean we dismiss them. It means we don't embrace them without some critical thinking. How are you all today? The comments are busy as anything. Hello, Kath and me and Reba and Jack and Crone and Maggie Mac and Christine and Simon and DP and Jenny from the blog. How are you all, beautiful people? Hello, Maria. Happy Friday to you as well. Good morning, JB Klein. Grand rising to you. On today's show, I'm going to be joined by writer Miri AF. We're going to be discussing the curious platform Democracy 3.0 and prisoner Lucy Connelly. Very interesting conversation, I suspect, is coming up there. I'm also going to be joined by podcaster Ant Critchley, and we're going to be talking about reclaiming your power in a world of illusion. We can all do with a bit of that, can't we? And did you hear about that absolute horror of a holiday and what happened to Beth Martin? We'll be talking more about that. Horrific story, horrific. And I want to look at properly the Jay Slater Inquest, the revelations. We didn't have time to examine that fully on Wednesday, but I want to go into that in more detail shortly. And Kneecap, the Irish band. Has anybody heard of the Streisand effect? It's operating right now. And prison reforms. They're talking some extreme measures, but are they necessary? We shall see. And we're going to end the show on the whole issue of how you have to release the old in order to welcome the new. I love that sort of stuff. Plus all the usual good stuff, viewer emails, live chat. They're already up and running. Yes, they are. We do news different around here. And you know why? Because some sod had to. And I'm that sod. How are you? I hope you're well. I'm sorry, guys. You were beaten to the first commenter spot by Ray J. Congratulations, Ray J. Congratulations. And it is a beautiful sunny morning, Mrs. Pirate. And we have a very beautiful video from you to show a little bit later. So thank you. Good morning, Mike. Good morning, Claire. And good morning to you all. Hello, Paul. I hope you are all well. And Crazy Bunny is here. And Paul Carden and Kravos. Thank you. Thank you, Kravos. He says, I'm an awesome sod. Well, I can dig that. I can dig that rather a lot. And Marco says, something I'd like to discuss at some point is the Mandela effect. Do you think he was rewriting history or an actual psychological thing? Well, that's interesting. Well, something to consider in future. Let's do this, Markson. Let's do it. Right. I want to start off about this young man. Has anybody been checking the details that were released at the inquest this week? Absolute gobsmacking stuff. Of course, we talked on Wednesday about it, Jay Slater's inquest in Lancashire, England. Well, now I've had time to actually examine what was said. I'm only shocked with the conclusion of his cause of death, which is a head injury consistent with a fall. But I want to talk much more about that before I get to the conclusion of the Home Office pathologist. So the story of Jay, which many of us knew, was that he was involved in a lot of wrong stuff, and the inquest has actually confirmed that. 19-year-old from Oswald Twistle in Lancashire. He died after sustaining multiple injuries. His remains were found near the village of Masca on Tenerife in July 2024. And what we've now discovered, excuse me, my lip gloss is leaking. And what we've now discovered is shortly before he went missing, he had two significant cash withdrawals declined in the hundreds. He sent a message to a friend saying he had stolen a £12,000 Rolex and was on the way to sell it. He sent a picture with knives to the same friend to let him know that he was prepared for any eventuality. He went off to an Airbnb with two men. One at least had drug convictions and has been in prison, both of whom failed to show as witnesses for his inquest. And Jay was said to be off his face and clearly in a desperate state to get money. And yet we are being told that his death is a result of him falling, tragically falling. I want to work through this. I'm not buying it. I'm not. I'm really not. As I said on Wednesday, the inquest was halted due to Jay's mum, Debbie Duncan, quite rightly wanting major witnesses at the inquest, including the last two men that Jay was known to be with at the Airbnb. You can see them here. Several witnesses had been asked to give evidence at the hearing at Preston Coroner's Court, but have neither been traced or they were unable to attend. And the court said that extensive efforts were made, but this is a coroner's court. This is an inquest. This is one of the highest courts in the land. And yet all of the actual witnesses, the major witnesses, did not appear. Something very wrong there. So I want to work through this a little bit more, right? As Jay Slater's mum said, how can we ever get any understanding? There's things we want to question. We want these people to be sat in front of us because our son went on holiday and didn't come back. So there's questions we need to ask. And then there was a brief break, and Dr. James Adderley, who is the coroner for Lancashire, who's overseeing it all, returned to court and then agreed to an adjournment to make a final effort to trace the witnesses. And a date for the resumption of the hearing has not yet been set, but it will be. So those missing witnesses, well, apart from the two men on the screen, shockingly also includes the two people that Jay went to Tenerife with in the first place, which is Brad Hargreaves, his mate, and his mate Lucy Law. Now, according to Lucy Law, so Lucy Law is, by the way, on holiday still in Tenerife. I would suggest it's not so much a holiday that Lucy does or is in Tenerife for. I think she's probably out there on business, some kind of business, one way or another, just like she was last year with Jay. And but according to Lucy's family, she didn't know. She's on holiday in Tenerife. She didn't know about the inquest. That's shocking to me. How could she not know about the inquest? And Brad didn't turn up, but he uploaded a selfie of himself shortly before the inquest started. And he apparently is also away, possibly on holiday. It's very, very weird, to say the least. Brad Hargreaves, if you remember, gave a really weird TV interview, but that's kind of as much as we know. These were close friends of Jay's. They absolutely should have been there. And Ayab Qasim, the fella who's kind of like doing this, he gave a podcast interview, but he wasn't at the inquest. And as many people said, right, some of the most important people who could talk about Jay's last moments, which is what an inquest is about, what led to the death, the cause of death. Right. And there should be more information details, but it appears to me that the Home Office pathologist has just, this is it. These are head injuries. This is a head trauma consistent with a fall. But really, is that really a suitable answer? I'm not convinced. Home Office pathologist, by the way, Dr. Richard Shepherd, said Jay's body was already decomposing when he examined Jay's body. He said that the teenager's cause of death, as I say, was a head injury. A CT scan showed there was a severe fracture of the head. Dr. Richard Shepherd said that there were extensive changes due to decomposition. There were changes due to the period of time he was lying in a hot environment. And Richard Shepherd said changes I would expect to see in that period of 28 days or thereabouts. I should point out that Dr. Richard Shepherd, while being the Home Office pathologist, is an establishment favourite who has a number of serious issues in his past. I have to say, I doubt the official inquest from him. He has some problematic reports, as I say, in his history, including that of Clive Freeman, imprisoned for a crime that almost certainly didn't happen. Nonetheless, a lot of interesting information has come out at the inquest. And some of that includes what people were already talking about online, and they were heavily demonized about it. And that includes Jay had stolen a 12K Rolex. Videos revealed for the first time at the inquest appear to show Jay traveling in the back of a car to the remote village of Masker after being at the rave earlier in the evening. Then there's another 2-second clip from Jay's phone to his friend, shows him appearing to brag about stealing the watch. Just took a 12K Rollie off some C word with this Mali kid, Somalian presumably, off to get 10 quid for it now. There was a whole big thing at the inquest that the guy was, one of the witnesses was saying 10 quid stands for 10k in the street slang that they're using, and there was a whole big hoopla about it, and quite odd the way that the coroner was behaving about it. And Jay also sent a video where he was posing with knives and telling his friend that he was prepared for whatever would happen, really. So the last steps, he was last seen around 7:50 a.m. On the morning when he disappeared in Masca, which is close to where he fell. And he was seen by two construction site workers. They said Jay asked them about bus times. And the friend that he'd sent the photos to and talked about stealing the Rolex was Josh Forshaw. They'd only met on the way to Tenerife in the queue at the airport. And Josh Forshaw told the inquest that Jay was off his head on drugs and had sent him the photo of knives in his possession while in Tenerife. And the inquest also heard Jay's messages about ended up getting thrown out with two Mali kids and about stealing the watch, etc. And Josh said he didn't inform Spanish police about the image of Jay with knives down his trousers, which was captioned in case it kicks off. And it wasn't until he returned home in the UK that he reported it to Lancashire police. Well, this is obviously ongoing. And this inquest, there will be further, there will be more. And I suggest that the coroner's office does everything that they humanly can to bring in witnesses who are absolutely essential to this. But at this moment in time, I'm struggling to buy this official narrative, really struggling to buy it, because there was literally everything set up for an absolute horror. And the problem is, he was a kid, 19 years old, right? Involved in lots of risky business. And the problem about being involved in such dangerous, risky business as being a thief, as being somebody with knives, is that you will also encounter people who are engaged in risky business and maybe as unconscionably badly behaved as you. That is a very sad reality. The inquest was Wednesday. But they need to have a part two. There was more information that was being leaked out yesterday, but it was halted because of Jay's mum quite rightly saying we need the witnesses. Couldn't agree more. Could not agree more. Right, let us move on from this. Either way, right, he sounded, I mean, just like a nightmare, right? I don't like thieves. I don't like liars. I don't like people who are engaged in all that sort of stuff. But he was still a kid, and that really saddens me, because I believe that there's redemption for everybody. Everybody can come back, and death seems like it's a huge thing, isn't it? There's no coming back from that. You can redeem yourself on earth, but there's no coming back from death. So very sad indeed in many respects, because I was a troubled teenager myself, so I can relate to a lot of, I wasn't stealing people's watches, by the way, but I was a very troubled teenager, and I was engaged in really, really risky behavior, and I can relate to a lot of what Jay was going through. But what was really interesting is last August, I'd interviewed the remarkable Peter Hyatt, who sadly passed in March of this year. Peter, brilliant statement analyst, and he analysed Lucy Law's GoFundMe. Do you remember that GoFundMe she launched almost immediately? And Peter Hyatt analysed it. It's available on my channel. I'll put a link in the description at the end of the show. And Peter analysed it, and just he absolutely knew that Lucy wasn't telling everything exactly how she knew it. And also, she was one of the last people to speak to Jay as well. He rang her and he talked about being thirsty. He'd cut his leg. So really sad. It's very sad indeed, John. It is, because he's only 19 years old. We are all somebody's baby, Em. We absolutely are. And obviously there was a lot of cynicism around the family, and there often is. People are very, very critical about very working class people. And again, I recognize that. I come from a very working class background, and I know how easy it is to tar and feather working class people. And people were very cynical about the GoFundMe and the family and all of that. And at the end of the day, they lost their baby. They lost their baby. And those witnesses must be summoned. They must be summoned, and there must be no more holidays right this moment in time. Good morning to you, Diana. Good morning. And let's have a brief look at this, because information is still coming out. I'm sure you recognize this man now. This is the suspect. Can't even say it. This is the problem, is sometimes I trip over official narratives because I do. So this is the suspect accused of gunning down two Israeli embassy staff members outside a Jewish museum in Washington, D.C. He's been charged with first-degree murder as well as murder of foreign officials and related firearm charges. This attack, we are told, took place on Wednesday night. It is also being investigated as a hate crime, and more charges are expected. It was a couple that he gunned down, Yaron Listinsky, that's it, and Sarah Lynn Milgram. They were shot dead outside an event at the Capitol Jewish Museum in Washington. We are told that the suspect opened fire on a group of four, exiting the event, killing the two victims. And the police identified the suspect as 30-year-old Elias Rodriguez from Chicago. He was arrested at the scene shortly after the shooting. I wonder if he had a passport on him. American authorities says this is a death penalty eligible case, adding that it's too early to say whether prosecutors will decide to seek a death sentence or not. And of course, there's lots being said online about this, lots and lots. I don't need to tell you, you know it as well as I do. And awful stuff. However, let us be clear here. Let us be clear here. The Israeli government and their puppets around the world cannot use this to close down criticism of Israel. Netanyahu is becoming increasingly isolated. That is the reality. Key allies are distancing themselves, and I include in that Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron, who wrote an open letter this week criticizing Israel and talking about the blockades. And what the Israeli government want to do is they want to blame people for noticing their behavior. So they are now coming out and saying these people were killed allegedly by this man because people are talking about what is going on in Israel. No. People are raging because what is going on in Israel, not because we are noticing what is going on in Israel. Don't get it twisted. And that is important. And I think that what we are seeing is a seismic censorship taking place around the world under the guise of anti-Semitism. And we have to be extremely careful. I make no judgment on this man or the women or the people that he is alleged to have killed. All I know is that immediately the Israeli government and their assistants and their voice pieces immediately come out and blame people for criticizing Israel for this happening. That is not okay. That is not okay. And I reject it. I reject it fulsomely and wholeheartedly, while hoping that the truth of the matter is told. Hoping that the truth of the matter is told about what happened on Wednesday night, which kind of brings me as a continuation to talk about Kneecap. We've talked about them before. Kneecap, of course, Irish band. On Wednesday, Liam O'Hannon, one of the band members who performs under the stage name of Mo Chara, he was charged with a terrorism offence for allegedly displaying a flag in support of Hezbollah at a gig in London on the 21st of November, 2024. He's scheduled to appear at Westminster Magistrates Courts on 18th of June. The Metropolitan Police have said the rapper was accused of displaying the flag at the O2 Forum in Kentish Town in such a way or in such circumstances as to arouse reasonable suspicion that he is a supporter of a proscribed organisation. The Met's Counter-Terrorism Command was only made aware of it on Tuesday, the 22nd of April, so some considerable months after the event. An online video from the event was shown to them. They carried out an investigation. The Crown Prosecution Service authorised the charge, and Kneecap have released a defiant statement saying they deny the offence. They say, we stand proudly with the people. You stand complicit with the war criminals. We are on the right side of history. You are not. We will fight you in your court. We will win free Palestine. And then last night, in an absolute act of unqualified defiance, frankly. They announced a last-minute gig at the 100 Club, and they literally sold out in 90 seconds with 2,000 on the waiting list. And this is the Streisand effect, of course. Kneecap, of course, came to international attention recently when they displayed a sign showing solidarity with Gaza at Coachella. Since then, they have been dropped from festivals and shows, and MPs have debated them in Parliament with the intention of stopping them from performing at events including Glastonbury. And as I say, their gig last night was absolutely rampacked, sold out. And they actually included in their X ad for the gig last night, the poster had a quote from former rebel, but now, well, basically establishment apparatchik, Johnny Lydon, formerly Johnny Rotten, who said the trio need a bloody good kneecapping in response to controversy around him. Just retire already, John, or just go and flog some more butter, which is what I believe you are doing these days. And the reality is that there is no shutting up anytime soon about what is happening in Israel. Even Starmer and Macron have been forced to send out a strong message, as I say. And what about Piers Morgan tweeting, "I condemn the Israel government"? Now, bear in mind, Piers Morgan is that character who puts his finger in the air, checks which way the wind is blowing, and that's what he follows. And for the most part, he's been, anybody who comes on his show to talk about Israel, he's like, but do you condemn Hamas? Do you condemn Hamas? And it's a sort of like, people tend to laugh about him now because he's so ridiculous. And he's done a 180, just like he did with COVID. I mean, you cannot trust these hired hands. You simply can't. You really can't. So that is that. I want to talk about this before I bring in my first guest. And that is, I'm sure you've seen the headline about castrating rapists and abusers. Well, the reality is UK prisons are an absolute mess. They are largely housing many of the wrong people, either for crimes that should not warrant detention, while conversely, not imprisoning people like child abusers for crimes that do. There's a new review by former Justice Secretary David Gauke. They're trying to work out what to do to reduce the prison population. It's really weird. They actually quoted a very specific number. They said they want to reduce it by 9,800 people by 2028, which seems a fairly precise number. Why not 10,000? Is it symbolic? Can somebody tell me if 9,800 has some sort of symbolism as far as they can understand? And the troubling part is that, so these key proposals, right, they'll see offenders who behave well in jail only serve a third of their term in custody before being released. I'm going to get to the troubling part immediately, and that is this will be based on sentence length, not the offence type or severity of the crime. What could possibly go wrong? What could possibly go wrong? It will be based, as I say, on length rather than offence type. That is problematic. The measures will apply to people serving standard determinate sentences, which is the most common type of jail term. There are so much criticism around this. You've had people from domestic abuse charities saying this is an absolute charter for abuse. People from rape and other abuse charities saying, wait a second. So once they've served that, I mean, literally, as long as they behave in prison for a period of time, they will be released regardless of the severity of their crime. What now? What now? And there's lots of provocative headlines that look as if they've been put out there as a phishing exercise to get our reaction. The most obvious one being the suggestion to chemically castrate sex offenders. Now, here's what's interesting. Obviously, I've actually talked about this before, right? The emotional reaction to people abusing children is immediately, I want to cut off whatever it is that enabled them to abuse children. I want to cut it off. I want to castrate them. I've talked about that before. But the more I've thought about it, the more I've wondered whether that could possibly really be a decent idea, because you only have to look at the very serious miscarriages that we've heard about recently. Andy Malkinson was in prison for 17 years for a rape he didn't commit. Imagine compounding the injustice by castrating the man. Horrendous, absolutely horrendous. So Mr. Gauke, the chair of the Independent Sentencing Review, said drugs that reduce sexual desire and will not be appropriate for every sexual offender. And he says, I'm not going to claim it's the answer for everything. You think? And but he claims that there are some sex offenders who want to reduce their desires. And if we can explore this, I think that is something that is worthwhile. My worry about it really, of course, isn't this a complete breakdown of bodily autonomy that will ultimately be used against innocent people? And how, as I say, how can we be sure that the person up for castration is really the offender? False allegations exist, as do wrongful identity and police patsies. And not just Andrew Malkinson. What about Peter Sullivan, Britain's longest serving miscarriage of justice, accused of sexual assault and murder and found totally innocent decades later? So on top of these men being innocent, we would also castrate them. There's something wrong. There's more. These proposals are said to be the biggest overhaul of sentencing power laws since the 1990s. And that includes judges being given more flexibility with what is considered lower level offences. So there is the possibility that they could be banned from public life. So, for example, rather than imprison them for what would be considered a low level offence, I'm not sure what that would be, it might be shoplifting perhaps. Although in this day and age, the shoplifting is way up there oftentimes. But what they would do is essentially ban them from public life. So they wouldn't be able to go to football matches or events or drive their car, for one example. This again, all this kind of stuff really troubles me, because I think that we're always in danger, right, when we make laws based on the worst behavior amongst us, right, which is always the minority. The minority are the worst amongst us, right? The vast majority of us are decent, law-abiding individuals who just want a peaceful life and don't want state or government overreach or interference. And there's nothing wrong with that. And these laws are obviously very draconian, very punishing. And even though they were the review was commissioned under the previous Conservative government, it is no coincidence it's come out during Keir Starmer's reign. And I call it a reign because he's acting like he's a sodding king. Teresa, I agree with you, sounding like a social credit score, right? And Jackie says the same, social credit system incoming. And there should be only two laws: do not cause harm or loss to another. Inner tuition. I love that. Any updates on Rent Boy arsonist? No, other than 3 have been charged. I think that is a fair question. So we finished with the prison proposals, and I'm going to save the story of Beth Martin until after our guest, because it's long, extensive. I have a video to play and I want to go into it deeply. It is a horrendous story, and I want to talk about that afterwards. But what was just said there about, so here's the thing. These arsonists, right, is obviously alleged arsonists, we should say. 3 Ukrainians, 1 is now, I think, nationalized as Russian. But there are some questions that should be asked, and many of them, I suspect, are potentially not being asked because it would be considered sub judice regarding the British Prime Minister. And we have to be careful. It's a live case. But there is obviously a whole heap of stuff that's being said out there. And I can't see it being a problem if perhaps when one of the journalists who can get close to Keir Starmer, and that ain't me, because obviously I would ask him stuff that these journalists don't, but one of the journalists, like a Beth Rigby from Sky, for example, if she could just ask whether he had ever met any of these 3 males, I can't see why that would be sub judice. I can't see it. Yes, Jenny from the blog. Beth, Ellie Gray's friend. And in fact, I'm going to be playing part of Ellie Gray's video, which is shocking and deeply sad. So some horrible stuff that we're going to be untangling there, but needs to be done. The whole point about Wake Up, of course, is about not just looking at news that everybody else is, but also looking at it in a different way. We do look at news that other people don't look at, by the way. I try as much as possible to look at stories that are suggested by our glorious viewers. And so we do attempt to look at it slightly differently. But yeah, I think regarding the 3 arsonists, there are fair questions that could be asked which would not interfere in any way with the police process. But they ain't going to ask them. You know they're not, kids. You know they're not. But it is curious, of course, isn't it? A lot of it doesn't make very much sense at all. I want to welcome in my first guest any moment now. And could it be a sting by the EU? The uncomfortable truth, Armand, the uncomfortable truth. We do deal with uncomfortable truths around here. And the aim is to just kind of face them head on as much as possible, which actually I think sort of brings me neatly into my first guest, because we're going to be dealing with something that, to all intents and purposes, on the surface looks like a decent thing, a jolly good thing. But isn't that a lot about what is going on in this day and age? Let's welcome her in. She is Miri AF. How are you, Miriam Finch?
I'm very well, thank you, Sonia Poulton. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Lovely to have you with us. You are, of course, well, you're a writer, you're a commentator, you're a researcher. You are a bit of a troublemaker, Miri, which is not a problem around here, because I consider myself a troublemaker as well, in the nicest possible way, and that is we ask uncomfortable questions. And you're here because you've been asking rather a lot of uncomfortable questions about the funding platform Democracy 3.0. Now, I wasn't as up to speed with as you are with Democracy 3.0, but I have done my research now, and I think that what you have to say is extremely interesting, has a great deal of validity. So before we go any further, tell people, what is Democracy 3.0 if they are not familiar?
Okay, well, Democracy 3.0 first came to my attention 2 years ago because it is a fundraising platform used by some what I consider to be fairly questionable names in our movement, who present themselves as being on our side, but I think quite possibly controlled opposition or approved opposition. People such as Andrew Bridgen, Dan Wootton, and Lawrence Fox have all used this, what appears to be a fundraising platform. Now, there's nothing innately suspicious about a fundraising platform, of course. You know, there are many good causes that use these crowdfunders. But what I found suspicious about Democracy 3.0 is that it's being used by these fairly big names who are fairly, wealthy and well-known men. And yet democracy itself seemed completely opaque, unknown, untransparent. For instance, so it's been around 4 years now, but it's only got about 450 followers on Twitter, only about 200 on Facebook, and only 26 on Instagram. And its Twitter and Facebook accounts have been almost completely inert for a year. So, this rang a lot of alarm bells for me. I was thinking, why is a crowdfunding platform that makes almost no attempt to promote itself, which it seems completely unknown and has no social media footprint, why is it so popular to these big names and these wealthy men? So I did do an expose article on Democracy 3.0 2 years ago, as did another website, actually, coming at it from a different perspective from me. Open Democracy did one as well. So there are other kind of investigative journalists smelling a rat around this platform. Anyway, that was kind of all I did in it, until I noticed about a week ago that Lucy Connelly, the alleged persecuted political prisoner who we're told is in prison for a tweet, was using the Democracy 3.0 platform to fundraise. So this immediately rang major alarm bells for me. I thought, why is she using this platform? Now, to give some further context, Democracy 3.0 was initially set up by a guy called Andrew Hawkins, and he's certainly well worth looking into. He's got a lot of establishment connections. He's involved with Baroness Philippa Stroud, who has direct links to ARC. But it's recently, the Democracy 3.0 has recently been purchased by Jeremy Hosking. Now, Jeremy Hosking is the multi-millionaire backer who is the sole financier of Lawrence Fox's Reclaim Party, who pays Lawrence Fox $300,000 a year, and who has loaned Andrew Bridgen £4 million to date that we know.
4 million?
Yes, 4 million.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's no small change, right? Okay, no, interesting. Not. No. Right.
No, indeed. So what we can see is Jeremy Hosking is apparently ploughing enormous amounts of money into this movement, but he himself is a very shadowy, shady character. Like, he doesn't have a Twitter account, he doesn't do podcasts, anything like that, but he is bankrolling all these big names that we do know, and he's bought that's him there, and he's bought the Democracy 3.0 platform. Now, Jeremy Hosking, as well as bankrolling the Reclaim Party, is also a massive donor to Reform. He's given them £2.4 million to date that we know of. Now, I suspect, I have written articles on this which go into my theory in much more detail at my website, miriaf.co.uk, but I suspect there is some stage managing going on with the whole Lucy Connelly situation, that it's not a simply organic situation that, a normal young mother just wrote an ill-advised tweet, the police pounced on it and she went to prison. I think there's much more going on than that. And to summarize, I think she is being presented to us as a totemic political martyr, to really get us outraged, to get us passionately defending her, to get us saying something must be done. And the thing that I think Jeremy Hosking, the owner of Democracy 3.0, and has ploughed so much money into this movement, I think the things he wants us to do is elect a reform government. He wants us to think, this is outrageous, this incompetent, detestable Starmer administration has put this poor, innocent young woman in jail. We would never get that with a reform government. Things have gone too far now. We're slipping into authoritarianism. We need reform to save the day. So I ultimately think that's what this Lucy Connelly psyop, and I do think it is some sort of psyop, is being used to achieve.
We're going to break that down as well. I want to just continue a little bit more about Democracy 3.0, because I do think your work is really important around this, because it is a very certain type that they appear to be raising funds for, obviously. And on these, a lot of them are people that I certainly wouldn't necessarily support, and for questionable reasons that they're raising money. All of these things, absolutely, unquestionably. I looked at the Lucy Connelly funder this morning, by the way. It was up to, just before I came on air, £134,455. Again, no small change at all. We're dealing with a lot of money. Now, obviously, Democracy 3.0 is it's a trading name of Reclaim the Media Limited. And Lawrence Fox, I noted this. So this is obviously from Companies House. Lawrence Fox became a director back in March. And I was looking at the terms and conditions of Democracy 3.0. And obviously, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is after £10,000 is, first of all, if you raise less than £10,000 on Democracy 3.0, you have to pay them a flat fee of £500. After £10,000, you pay them 7%, right? And obviously, Lawrence Fox and Jeremy Hoskin are directors of this company. So presumably, they're making a profit from these campaigns. That's fair to say. That shouldn't be litigious to say that, should it?
No, not at all. That's right there in their terms and conditions, and you've got it exactly right. There's a flat fee of £500, and then after £10,000, they take a 7% fee. Now, Lawrence Fox has claimed on Twitter that in this particular case, in the case of Lucy Connelly, they've waived their fee, but whether that's true or not, we have no way of knowing without going through their accounts. But it's very interesting that you know about the £500 upfront fee, because I'm not aware of any other crowdfunding platform. People can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm not aware of any other crowdfunding platform which is, phenomenally more well-known and more successful than Democracy 3 that charges such a significant upfront fee. Now, why is somebody going to go to Democracy 3 and pay £500, not knowing if they're going to even make 10 quid? When they could go to any one of the big names and not have to pay an upfront fee. Now, in my opinion, this is a way of keeping Democracy 3 a closed shop. Now, ironically, it claims that it wants to democratize political influence. That's what it says on its About Us page. But it's actually keeping itself an anti-democratic closed shop by only being open to those who've got a spare 500 quid. So I believe that this platform isn't geared towards the everyday person looking to start a crowdfunder. I believe that it's only there to cater to the, shall we say, elite, and that £500 is there, as gatekeeping, because you or I or anyone watching, we're going to go to that platform and think, am I going to pay them 500 quid? It's very unclear what you get. Exactly, when I can just go to Crowd Justice or GoFundMe or whatever and pay nothing.
So obviously, one of the things that you say is you suspect, your theory is that this has been set up to get a reform government. But there's also probably more attached to it than that, isn't it? As, for example, it appears very much, we hear the term bandied around a lot, the whole idea of controlled opposition. But when I started to look at their campaigns, there is very much a theme to them. It's basically, you can behave in fairly abysmal ways, but we will support you on here. We won't allow you to be cancelled, all of these things. It's very similar cases. And the Andrew Bridgen one never made sense to me, because I'm not sure why anybody would be crowdfunding for a civil claim against Matt Hancock to do with defamation, even though I think probably Bridgen has probably got a case, actually, having been in defamation for the last 5 years. I think he probably has. But what shocked me was that he was publicly crowdfunding for it. That in itself is problematic. What did you think when you first saw that? And I think you quoted Abby Roberts on this. Remind me of that quote. It's a good quote to do with that particular lawsuit.
Yeah, Abby said that suing Matt Hancock for defamation is like pulling Ted Bundy over for speeding.
That's it. It's a good quote. It's a good quote. It's a graphic quote. It explains a lot. So the thing is that your observations are very much that this crowdfunding site is not operating like at full tilt. It's not on par with a GoFundMe, which is on a constant basis. You're talking about has very small amount of followers on social media. And what was that comment you made about how they haven't even been tweeting much, but have only just started tweeting again about Lucy Connelly? Remind me of that.
Okay, so their Twitter account, which is almost completely inert, it's got 450, something like that, followers. And the last time they tweeted was August 2024. And then they tweeted yesterday or the day before, promoting their Lucy Connelly fundraiser. But what legitimate crowdfunder doesn't tweet for nearly a year? Right? They're charging people this whopping fee for, their great influence and their great promotion. And they can't even be bothered to send a tweet in nearly a year. I mean, it just doesn't stack up. But what makes this even more suspicious? So on their board of directors, so as you say, Democracy 3.0 is a trading name of Reclaim the Media. That's Jeremy Hosking's media company. And as you observe, Lawrence Fox is also on the board of directors. And so is a guy called Edward Pugh. He goes by Jake Pugh. He's a former MEP for the Brexit Party. And Jake Pugh is not only a director of Reclaim the Media, he's a director of Hello Social Club, which is kind of a boutique social media expertise platform. And what Hello Social Club promises to do is give you an enormous following on social media, to monetize your campaigns, to make you very visible and successful. So you're like, hang on. So Democracy 3.0 has got a multimillionaire behind it. That's Jeremy Hosking. It's got a social media expert behind it. That's Jake Pugh. And yet it's got, 26 followers on Instagram? Doesn't tweet in a year? Something not quite adding up, is there?
That is curious. That is very curious. They also, of course, I think they tried to, didn't they raise money for Calvin Robinson to get him a house or something? Weird stuff. This is weird stuff. These are people who, to all intents and purposes, appear to be doing fairly okay in life. They certainly don't appear to be on their uppers. And Dan Wootton as well, somebody I find absolutely reprehensible, who absolutely, as far as I'm concerned, inveigled his way into what kind of remains of a truth movement. And by the end of the day, he's still a tabloid hack and always will be. And so obviously there's something weird about it. And when I read, you've written 2 pieces about it now, substantial pieces. I put a link in the description, and you call it a smoking gun for controlled opposition. And I think that there's a fair argument to be had there. So let us draw our attention now to Lucy Connelly, obviously the latest person that they are champion. So you describe Lucy as, in quotes, persecuted political prisoner, right? And I also believe that Lucy Connelly is a psyop, but not to the point that you do. So we're definitely of difference of opinion here, which is not a problem. That's why you're here. I don't want people to echo what I'm saying, right? We're not an echo chamber. So tell us, what are your thoughts? And we are still allowed opinions about people. What are your thoughts about Lucy Connelly?
Well, we know, this certainly isn't a conspiracy theory. This is documented fact that the overlords want to really tighten up free speech online. They want to shut us down. They want the online safety bill, and they want to scare us out of speaking freely. So I believe they set up a number of psyops to scare us out of sharing our thoughts online, of which Lucy Connelly is one. So I think how they want us to react to this is go, oh my God, you can't say anything these days. One ill-advised tweet, setting a bit of a temper and you could be in jail. I don't believe that's true, but I believe that they want us to think that that's true. Now, some people have said to me on Twitter, well, I bet you wouldn't tweet what Lucy said, would you, to test your theory? I said, well, I personally wouldn't tweet it simply because I don't believe it, not because I think that I would go to prison. But I said, I will share the words. And I have, without any censorship. So I've shared the words that she said in full on my website and on my Substack account. And if these were so, verboten and so illegal, I would be in trouble just for sharing the words. ChatGPT won't share them. If you ask ChatGPT, what did Lucy say? It'll give you an overview, but it won't tell you the words.
Wow, that's interesting, isn't it? So your attitude is you simply don't believe the story as told, right? And but you even go further. I mean, I allow for the fact that she is real, that she could well be a prisoner, that this could, but what I believe is that she's been weaponized against us. Whereas I think where we separate is you believe her to be an actor, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, it is, because she has a phenomenally large amount of media appearance for just an ordinary woman, as she's been presented to us, going back like a long time. So, for instance, in 2021, Lucy's husband, Ray, was presented to us in the press. It made the BBC. It was quite a big deal as Northampton's first COVID patient, right? Okay, so I think that that's going to raise some alarm bells for a lot of us. And Ray Connelly said to the media, I knew that I had COVID, this deadly plague, when I was eating my apple and cinnamon breakfast porridge, and I realized that it didn't taste very appley. And I thought, oh, this is just the overlords trolling us. This is just a complete mockery. And so when somebody's husband is in the press as first COVID victim and he's says such a ridiculous thing, I think we've got to start being a bit skeptical. But actually, Lucy and Ray Connelly were in the press 10 years earlier when it was reported, very tragically, that their son Harry died at 19 months old. And Lucy and Ray Connelly were in the press. They were in the Daily Mail, but a big article on them. This was 2011 or 2012. Commenting on this terrible tragedy, and it was NHS incompetence. And also, I'd been told that Lucy Connelly was in the press again a few years ago for being fined for taking her daughter out of school in term time to take her on holiday. Now, that's quite a large amount of media exposure for just one family. And I have a little saying, not to be taken completely literally, but just to kind of encompass how I see the media, which is if it's headline news, it's a ruse, which means things that are very prominent, especially repeatedly prominent, are often being manipulated, staged, or even outright faked. So we have been, it's disingenuous for the media to tell us now that Lucy is just an ordinary young woman who, never come to prominent public attention before. She isn't. She and Ray have come to prominent media attention for that 15 years. So that to me is a red flag, that these are not just ordinary people. I think they are some sort of assets. Yes.
And there's so much more to this as well, of course. There are issues about people not being able to trace the kind of provenance of the judge who was involved, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. So this was in a fairly mainstream source. The Spectator did an article because the Spectator is on Lucy Connelly's side and thinks this is a terrible travesty and all the rest of it. And one of their journalists, I think Jonathan Miller, said, I have consulted something like 42 sources trying to find some background information on this judge.
I've got the direct quote here, actually. I have consulted 24 sources for this article and can find nothing substantial whatsoever about this judge, his legal scholarship, not even where he was born. That's extraordinary. Didn't you do a search for him?
I did a search, and the first thing that came up was that very Spectator article.
What?
Now we have to ask ourselves, is it really plausible that a 68-year-old judge could have such a non-existent internet footprint, and that a seasoned journalist at the Spectator could find out nothing about him? This, to me, it doesn't seem very plausible. So what I speculated is, is this a real judge, or is this just a character actor? Is this someone playing a judge? Is this a fictional character who's been scripted and created for the purposes of participating in this acted, staged psyop?
I mean, that's an extraordinary suggestion, but it is interesting. I mean, I deal with judges a lot, and almost all of them, they have a history. You can see where they come from. You can see when they were called to the bar. I mean, all of these things, right? And not with him. But there's more that you've discovered as well. I thought it was really interesting. You were looking into Lucy Connelly's timeline. And I know that national media were as well, but tell me some of the conclusions that have been reached about her timeline, because I think that is interesting. Sheer volume of tweets, right?
Yes. Well, okay. So what would be considered average use for an active Twitter user would be about 3 to 7 tweets a day. Obviously, some days you might do a bit more, some days you might do a bit less, but about 3 to 7. Lucy Connelly, over an 8-month period, tweeted on average 100 times a day, every day.
Wow.
Now, yeah, right. If you take out 8 hours for sleeping, that means she was tweeting about 6 times an hour, every waking hour, every day for 8 months.
Wow.
Now, I don't find that very credible, because we are told that Lucy Connelly was a mother. She had a young daughter. She was running a home, and she was running a demanding business, looking after multiple small children. How on earth could somebody juggle all of that and find the time to tweet 100 times a day, every single day?
What's your theory?
So my theory is that she wasn't running that account, because if you crunch the numbers and you look at Twitter trends, to post to the volume she was posting, she outpaces more than 99.9% of all Twitter users, and possibly more than 99.99%.
Wow. That's extraordinary. I mean, I have to be straight with you. And this is not something that I've not said before, but I think it's very interesting, the cast of characters that have gathered around her and outside the High Court, for one example. And these are people who have all found themselves in very kind of high profile situations, often to do with censorship issues, such as Alison Pearson, Dan Wootton, Toby Young of the Free Speech Union. He is now a Baron Young of Acton, and he's supposed to be some sort of free speech champion. I've warned our viewers about Free Speech Union before, because people have gone there and have been told to plead guilty or admit to guilt, and then there's been a problem, and that is what some of their legal advisors have done. So I've warned people about the Free Speech Union. But you feel that these are all scripted characters, don't you? You feel they're actors.
Yeah, I absolutely do. And just to further illustrate this with what the Lucy Connelly Twitter account was suggesting. So a lot of people have said to me, I know Lucy is legitimate because I've interacted with her on Twitter.
Right.
And I completely understand why that makes the whole thing feel very real. But in reality, we don't know who we're talking to when we interact with a Twitter account. Just because the account is called Lucy Connelly, you don't know it's her. You don't know if it's a he. You don't know if it's multiple people. But looking at the volume of her tweets, and also this is very interesting, her account was only active for 9 months. The 9 months leading up to her supposed arrest.
Oh, is that right? I didn't realise that. Interesting. Okay.
So we're given the impression that this woman had been tweeting for years and years and had gradually built up a following like legitimate people do. But actually, that's not true at all. It was a very short period of time, an enormously high-profile volume of tweets, and they were very carefully curated tweets and very carefully directed to appeal to certain people, to certain groups of people. And she interacted with lots and lots of different dissident groups. You know, she commented on all the issues that are kind of dog whistles for them, if you will, you know, COVID stuff, immigration stuff, Islam, all of that. And she built up this immense following. And the enormity of her following and the strength of feeling that all these strangers online seem to have to her, to me, is just not credible for one lone woman, you know, doing on her mobile phone in between caring for all these children, looking after her child, running a home. Not plausible. Much more plausible that a team of people were running her account and had created a brand, because 100 tweets a day is something we simply just don't see from individuals. It's something we would see from a business or a brand, where lots of people are running the account and trying to develop a profile. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Jake Pugh, who is on the director board of Democracy 3.0, is also a director of Hello Social Club. And that would be exactly the kind of company that you would hire to create that kind of brand. So I think it's actually Hello Social Club behind the Lucy Connelly account. And they developed a brand, they developed a following, they developed a profile, and then that has led into the so-called arrest and alleged imprisonment of what, yes, I do believe is an actor.
Interesting. Very interesting. So I've got some questions. Because I'm a journalist, I always have questions. And one of them is, so if your theory is accurate, that doesn't allow for any victims. So, for example, her family as one example. So where do you fit on that? Because my concern always about any kind of conspiracy theory, and I've seen so many conspiracy theories become conspiracy fact, as indeed have you, right? So we know that happens absolutely unquestionably. But in situations where, what if, so let me just suspend the idea that she isn't an actor. What if she really is real and she's really going through this and her family are really going through this? By saying that she's an actor, doesn't that kind of victimize them, innocent parties as well? What is your position on that? Because obviously whenever we say something is a psyop or a false flag, that immediately discounts that there are any victims in it. Do you get my point?
Absolutely. But what I would say is that there are currently thousands of women imprisoned, thousands of children missing their mothers, thousands of men missing their partners. And, you know, we don't seem to care about them very much. You know, we're not talking about them. We're not doing fundraisers for them. We're not developing mugs with free whatever their name is on. We're just focusing on this one woman who I'd say is probably in a much better position than a lot of women prisoners, if it's real. First of all, because when she comes out of jail, she's going to have, what, 120, 130,000 pounds waiting for her. She was already living
way more.
More. Yeah. She was already living a fairly middle-class lifestyle. Whereas you look at the absolute, tragic circumstances surrounding many women prisoners, you know, typically these women are from underprivileged backgrounds, they've undergone trauma, they've undergone abuse, and they're going to come back into that traumatic, abusive lifestyle. That there's no fundraisers for them, there's no national outcry for them. So I would say, in response to that, why should we only care about Lucy Connelly's husband and child and not the husbands and children of all these, faceless women with no media profile who are also in jail?
I mean, I think that is actually a really fair point. We know that women have actually been in prison for not paying their TV licenses. We know that there are many babies that are born in prison as well. All of that is absolutely spot on right. So, and I think one of the other things that you say is that if you know their name, they're in the game, right? That now I take issue with that. And the reason I take issue with that is because I worked in legacy media for a very, very long time. And I saw how things worked and how they selected certain people, right? And I was the number one debater on This Morning for almost 10 years, and they offered me all manner of incentives to promote me further up the ladder. But I wasn't prepared to do it because I wanted to remain a freelancer where I could just pop in, give my opinion, and then pop out again. But I'm not controlled opposition, and they were offering me all manner of incentives. And so while I'm not necessarily as well known as a Lawrence Fox, as one example, I am known to a lot of people, and I'm 100% not controlled. So where does that theory fit in for you?
So I think a lot of people who are in mainstream media don't know they're in the game until they try and go against the narrative.
Oh,
so not everybody is knowingly, being quote unquote controlled. So that would be true for you. That would be true for James Denball. He's written about that quite a lot. Like you believe that you have complete agency and you're making all your own decisions. True. And it's only when you go against the grain that they go, you can't go there. And then you realize that there is a control mechanism in place. And that's often when a lot of legitimate people like yourself step back and say, well, okay, I'm not going to do this anymore. So when I say if you know their name, they're in the game, that doesn't necessarily mean that they know they're in the game.
Now that's interesting. That makes much more sense, because it never quite made sense to me, because I was like, well, does she have media experience? Has she seen close up how it actually works? Do you have media experience? Have you worked in legacy media?
No, not at all.
Right. So you're looking at it from the outside as well. But I think that is a fair point that you make. And that is, people might not necessarily know they're in it. And I think that is a fair point. And that kind of legitimizes that comment more. So before you leave us, let me just get this right. What you're saying today is democracy 3.0 looks increasingly likely as if it is a funding platform that is really controlled opposition. And Lucy Connelly is a state actor, which will enable them to not bring in laws, to further encroach on our rights with things like the online harms and all the other things that they're trying to pull together right now. Is that a fair summary of what you've said today?
Yes, it is indeed. Last
word to you then.
If you found what I said interesting and like to read more, please do visit my website at miriaf.co.uk. I've also got a Substack, which is miri.substack.com.
Excellent. What an interesting conversation. I knew I'd enjoy this conversation. Thank you for joining us today, everybody. Miri AF, and I have already put a link in the description to her Substack. But don't go reading it right now. Stick around, and you can read it at the end of the show. Lovely to have you with us, Miri. Thank you for explaining yourself so well. Brilliant. Wonderful. Miri AF, everybody. Take care. Have a great Friday.
Thank you, Sonia. You too.
Wonderful. I enjoyed that. Oh, let me get Lucy Connelly off the screen. I thoroughly enjoyed that conversation. And I know that Miri can be a controversial character, but so can I. And the whole idea with Wake Up was never to play safe, not ever. And I think that differing viewpoints are really, really important. I spent absolute decades in legacy media, and it is a soup. And to sort of badly paraphrase Noam Chomsky, is that the illusion of freedom is because they allow you to debate just a select few amount of topics and debate them very, very loudly. But outside of that, and you're in trouble. You'll end up with the police on your door. We all know how that works, don't we? Says the woman who was under police investigation for 6 months. Right. Let me have a look what you're saying in the comments before I bring in our next guest. How are you all? Randy liked her very much. Oh, Robert believes her. Maria says, no, she was fab and accurate. Very interesting. Thank you, Miri. Interesting. That is 100% true, Sonia. What is? Some great journalism for Miri. Oh, Miri, thumbs up from our critically thinking commentators. You know what they're like in the live chat. They don't mess around. They really, really don't. And what's that? What? Don't play small. Too late for that. Disrupt. Let's disrupt. What's that, Cara? The comments disappeared when I mentioned Miri. Now, I think I've seen Miri's theory about Madeleine McCann, and I don't agree with her. And I speak as somebody, obviously, who's been to the scene of crime twice, who's made 2 documentaries. And I think, if I understand correctly, Miri's theory about Madeleine McCann is she's going to suddenly appear, and then it will discredit people who have said that she wasn't abducted. I think that is the theory. I think it would be almost impossible, bless her, for Madeleine McCann to suddenly appear, because I tend to agree with the Portuguese police, and that was sadly Madeleine McCann never left apartment 5A alive. But again, I think Miri's theories are interesting. And what is the point of a show like this if you can't explore other people's ideas? Long-term psyop. Yeah, well, Cara, I mean, I actually do think that the Madeleine McCann story did become a psyop, because we know for a fact that prior to Madeleine going missing, Tony Blair had gone to the forensic science lab, and he'd made a promise to them that the whole idea was to get everybody's DNA in Europe. And that's not just for people who are accused of being criminals. Obviously, when you're arrested, you have to give your DNA in terms of like markers. But Tony Blair wanted it for everybody. And then, of course, what happened was Kate and Jerry McCann then went across all European parliaments, and they were calling for the I think it was the red amber system. Probably forgotten the name of that now, but that also included the issue of DNA and cross-border cooperation. And Jerry McCann very famously said that if they'd had that, then when Madeleine went missing, they would probably be able to find her quite quickly. And then we also know about the British scientist who was also setting up the implanting of chips for children, and that gained some traction back then. And I remember speaking to him, and actually he had been so terrified at what had happened when he'd come out in the press that he then went back into the darkness, went back into the shadow, as they do. Stephen has never believed the abduction story, and that's because you're a critical thinker, Stephen. Right, let's welcome in our next guest. You may or may not know him. And here he is. Ant Critchley. How are you, Ant? We're a bit funny on the screen there. How are you?
Good morning, Sonia. Are you okay?
I am grand, as you can hear, Ant. I don't hang around. Good. I don't mess around, right? So thank you so much for being here with us. And thank you to Gaynor and Gaynor's mum, Gaynor's 81-year-old mum who watches Wake Up. Thank you. We very, very much appreciate you. And Gaynor had suggested you. She said you've got an amazing life story, a soul journey to tell. And well, let's not really hang around, because I've been watching your videos. Wonderful, wonderful stuff. Breaking free from the matrix. You're not broken. You've been hijacked. These are like words that I say, Anne, right, a lot of the time. And I also want to talk to you about Saturn, which I've always considered the taskmaster. I mean, there's loads to talk to you about. But first of all, I want to talk a little bit about what brought you here. Now, according to Gaynor, you tried to keep your pub open in Lancashire during C19. Bear in mind, we're live streaming on YouTube. They still have ridiculous policies regarding C19. But what happened regarding your pub and C19?
Interestingly, Gaynor's mum used to come to my pub. So she was very rebellious and used to arrive. I used to have a Truth or Tuesday at the pub. We had people come in from miles and miles around. We signed for that pub, interestingly called the Crown / Corona. We signed for that pub the day they shut the pubs. So I wasn't there to have a successful business, and it came. I was fully aware of what they were doing from an early point. But we played the game initially. You know, if there's any kind of regret that I have, it's that I didn't go hard from the beginning. But we'd moved back to a village that we love. I have a young family, and I care for my partner who is disabled. So it was kind of, let's play the game, because I didn't know how long this thing was going to last, to be honest with you. But when they started, well, obviously they started with the rule of 6, didn't they? And you had a table of 6, and all 6 meters apart and all that nonsense. And I had a problem one afternoon where I had a table of 7, and I was getting punters coming to say, "Oh, table 7 on that table, 7 on that table."
Oh my God!
And I was my soul broke inside, and I was thinking, I'm not doing this. I cannot do this. So, granted as well, if you think that my missus is disabled, we've got 2 kids, we're a young family. I sat up with her one night and I said, "Lou, I'm sorry, but we're going to lose everything. I can't do this, and I'm not going to do it." And we did. We lost everything. But we had probably 8 months of an incredible journey where we became a hub, not just in Lancashire, but miles around, people coming from Scotland, all over the country, you know. But unfortunately, when people travel, they don't drink. So there wasn't any money coming into the till.
Bless you.
So we lost everything. We lost our home. And I had a breakdown at the end of it as well, you know, because it was a lot to carry. But we did an incredible job, and it's something I'm very proud of. But yeah, the breakdown was very important because that set me on my path. Yeah, but it set me on my path of I've always been a kind of person that's cared very deeply about people and humanity in whole. You know, it always bothered me growing up. I could never understand why a bloodline family would have so much control and why they were potentially better than we are. So it's always affected me, that. And this breakdown, I found myself at a point where I was on the kitchen floor. I couldn't dress myself. I didn't want to do anything. In fact, it was the point where I'd had enough. I didn't want to be here anymore. But I had to make a decision, and I had a very strong intention. And that intention was to fix myself and then show people how to fix themselves as well. So that's where the Stellifi journey really started back at that point, even though Stellifi as a channel didn't launch till last March. But from 6 months of kind of going in my shadow, diving into the deep subconscious, recognizing why we are so conditioned, why we're put in fear so much. I had to look at all these aspects, why humanity is so disconnected to themselves. And interestingly, you know, I don't, you know, depending on who I'm being interviewed by, I don't talk woo-woo a lot of times because people get a bit put off by that. But I had a phone call from a gentleman when I had my breakdown, who had come from Inverness to the pub one day, and I don't remember him, but he rang me out of the blue, and the first words weren't hello or anything like that. It was, you need to remember who you are. And this is the problem with humanity right now, is that we do not remember who we are. We're so conditioned, we're so put into systems of fear and slavery that we forget our true essence. And that's where my passions lie in more than anything right now, is to help people come back to who they are. Because if a large percentage of population did the inner work and recognize actually they are incredibly powerful, beautiful souls, we're all just trying to get through life. Yeah. But if we recognize our true selves in our heart, this world is going to be a so much better place. The balance will return considerably. So I dive deep into various subjects, if you like, on my channel of control. Esoteric is something that's interested me from an early age as well. So I dive into that, not just the 3D political landscape that we find ourselves in.
And it's very interesting what you say about your breakdown. I had a breakdown at 30, and that I still consider to this day to be my saver. That was literally like the thing that saved me, because what it allowed me to do was detach from the old way that was not working for me. And essentially, as I say, the breakdown led to the breakthrough. And I think that happens for many, many people. But it's also that it's an immense spiritual moment as well, isn't it? And I really can relate to that whole idea of, you know, you lying down, you're not sure you want to end it, but you are actually ending the old you, aren't you? And you can't, and it's really funny because the end of Monday and Friday's wake up, I always try to end on some kind of philosophical note at the end of the show. And today's is about releasing the old in order to be able to step into the new. And that is the reality. You had to stop that old way of being, but you were still showing this side of you, who you are now, by the way that you ran your pub. The fact that you had that, you know, people coming together, meeting up to be able to talk truth to each other, all of that was really important. So that's all part of your journey. And do you kind of accept that now? As painful as that period was, do you see it as almost like the building blocks to enable you to move into the next stage of your life? Or do you still look back on it and go, that was a horrendous period of time, I can't cope with it?
No, it's an incredible period of time.
Yeah,
it's an amazing period of time. Like I said, the only regret I have is I didn't go harder but I look at my journey I had a big change in my life from 2012. And that came from trauma, that came from a divorce, and my worldview changed. And it's interesting. I was in a business networking meeting the other day, and I had to present. And so I'm there with 20 plus corporate type figures, and I presented my story in 10 minutes as best as I could. And this is from trauma that brought me to an 11/11 awakening, and these numbers took me on a journey. They took me to a gentleman called it's past my name now, but he talked about 11/11, but he also talked about the Olympic Games and the ceremony that the place that was being built, why it was being built there energetically. And then all of a sudden I'm starting to see, loose change came into my life then, and zeitgeist and various other aspects. So my life started changing. So the rabbit holes were coming fast and furious.
Right.
And interestingly as well, so I moved to Croston, where the pub is, back at that time with my daughter. And I met my partner now at that period of time. And this is another woo-woo moment, not to put anybody off my story kind of thing. But
let me tell you, my viewers generally are interested in woo-woo moments, right? Just to give you some background, my mum was a medium. I grew up around a seance table, Anne. You're not going to get more woo-woo than me, right?
Not at all.
But I'm still an investigative journalist who deals with evidence and facts, right? Because we can do that. We've been blessed with all those things as our birthright, right? So yeah, absolutely. Go on, woo-woo away, no problem.
Okay, so the 11/11 moment then is worth mentioning, in terms of, because you mentioned that your mum was a medium. So a friend of mine who was a psychic medium, I was struggling financially terribly at that time. It's just me and my daughter, and I was wondering what I'm going to do, how I'm going to survive. And my friend came over and he said, you need to ask your angels for help. And I remember saying, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life. Now, I'm not in with the angel new age thing as such, but it did take me on that path for a little while. But however, the following day, as I was driving to my parents' house with my daughter, on the dashboard was 111111, and in the middle, the center console was 11/11. And I thought, that's bizarre. Turned the car off, pulled over, turned the car off, turned it on again, and all the ones are still there. Drove to my parents' house, got into the house, sat down, got my phone, scrolling through Facebook, and this thing popped up. It said, if you see 111, your angels are listening. And all the hair stood up. And I was like, well, everywhere I looked then for a good period of time, 1111 or 111 just kept appearing. So I then started to research it. And that's what took me on the path and I was brought into the shadows of this world then. I was shown the corruption of this world. It's all for a purpose. It led me to 2020. But when we moved to Croston, as I was cleaning the house, we'd been there a couple of weeks, so it wasn't the first time I'd cleaned the kitchen, by the way. I had cleaned it before, but I found a piece of paper while I was cleaning, and it was folded. And I opened it up, and it said, don't forget to breathe. And I was like, going around to my partner, have you seen this piece of paper before? Nobody in the house had seen it before. Within weeks, my partner fell ill, terribly ill. We were took on a journey where the NHS failed us so miserably. I nearly lost my partner twice. This journey that took us to the Crown in 2020 was all part of it, because we needed to see the corruption within the NHS as well. It's all part of the journey, so whatever happened at the Crown later was because of all these moments. So I'm grateful.
Everything led to this moment, like literally, like it's not even a coincidence that you and I are on the same screen having this conversation right now, right? This was probably all decided a rather long time ago, maybe even before we were even born, who knows? And that is the thing, is going back to what you were saying before, is we've essentially been dumbed down since birth. We've been put into a system which farmed us like sheep, and sheep should not be farmed either. But they put us into a system, and obviously the whole school system itself was designed to stop the factories. It wasn't about creating critical thinkers, and critical thinkers are a problem, obviously, to the very fake powers that be, because we test the system and we say, no, we didn't believe that C19 narrative. That was a load of bunkum, and we're protecting people. But I do believe that there is a destiny attached to it. So I agree with you, Anne, and I lost my brother and sister during that period as well, and there are still question marks over it, and the level of pain involved regarding the NHS is just horrendous. But we are here for a reason. So bring me to Stellifi. What does Stellifi mean? I didn't search what Stellifi means. What does it mean?
Well, Stellifi is to recognize the star that you are, really, to reach that point of illumination for yourself, so you know that you are special. You know, that's the way I see it. But it was the Stellifi name was inspired for me by Ian Brown, because Ian Brown was one of the few that stood up. I have a big musical background, and all my heroes were just ridiculous during that period of time. They were a complete letdown. I was so grateful that Ian Brown was one of the few that stood up.
Same.
You know, I love the man to death. So it was that was great. And so I just thought I need to represent Ian Brown in some way on what I'm doing. So Stellifi was born in that way, and then I started interviewing. So Dr. Kong, and then Abby Roberts came on, because I did a festival as well after the pub shut, you know. So after my breakdown, 6 months later, I managed to pick myself up so much. We did a 2-day festival in Lancashire where 500 people turned up, and we had speakers all through the weekend and great music, and it was a very high vibe with great, you know, I'm very proud of all that, you know, very proud of all that, because we've got a purpose, and we've got something. There's work to be done. Whatever's going on inside me, it's like a mission. And Stellifi is about helping people realize their true potential. And I'm still trying to find mine, by the way. This is an ongoing process, but I want to help people along that journey.
I feel I've reached a stage in my life where I am now realizing myself, and I didn't get an opportunity to do that before, because I was working for legacy media, and again they keep you in that little soup, and you think that you're radical in legacy media, but you're not really. You're just their kind of useful idiot that makes it look as if there is some semblance of democracy within media, and there wasn't. And so I now very much feel that I am realizing myself, and I love it, Anne, because I literally feel like I feel power in my fingertips. You know that feeling where you like feel you're alive, you feel like you're electrical current, and I do a lot of the time, right? And I'm sure that you're going through that as well, because the thing obviously about realizations is they can come really quickly. Like you were talking about how you were suddenly realizing all these corruptions and injustices. Well, it's almost like a dam that has been held back, and then that series of events led you to the point where the dam was removed, and then everything that wanted to come to your conscience, to your consciousness, was suddenly able to flood in. Was it overwhelming though? Yeah,
completely. Yeah, totally overwhelming. You know, we're battling all sorts of situations in our own personal sphere as well, aren't we? You know, and you know, regarding the C19 narrative, you know, I lost all my friends, and as most of us did, a lot of my friends and my family thought I was nuts. You know, I was battling situations where my daughter was listening to a mum who's completely opposite to me, and to the point where she was so close to having the medical intervention. She decided she was going to have it because she was told that she was, you know, they were going to Disney World, and without it, you can't travel. So it was at that point. But interestingly, speaking of woo-woo, so I started doing Reiki. I was having a Reiki attunement, and in my mind's eye, I saw this huge being protecting my daughter. He literally put his hand down, protected my daughter. And I was going downhill mentally at this point anyway, because I thought I'm going to lose my daughter, you know. And then 3 days later, Sonia, the jab bus was going to my daughter's school. So I'd accepted the fact she was going to have it, right? I was cleaning the pub, and I get a phone call from my daughter at 8:30 in the morning. I was like, what's going on? I thought, you're going to school? I can't. I vomited. I'm not allowed in. And I'm like, thank God for that. A week later, America changed the rules. Under 18s could travel. So, you know, and it was like divine. divine moment.
But you're recognizing it as such. And that is the thing. We've been taught to go, that's woo-woo, that's not real, that's just a coincidence. But the moment we start to recognize how the universe is lining up for us, I am in no doubt whatsoever, Ant, that once we make a decision that is for the good of society, I'm not talking about psychopaths or sociopaths, I'm talking about people who genuinely want to leave society in a better shape than we entered it, right? And that is me. I'm one of those people. It's a big order, it's a tall order, right? But that is what I want to do. That is my aim. And that's what I get up in the morning to do. And that is why I produce this show. But so the thing is that you're on that path and you're tackling these incredible topics that need to be tackled. And again, that is divine intervention as far as I'm concerned. Absolutely divine intervention. And hallelujah for that. Thank you so much, universe. Thank you so much for protecting that child. So talk to me about some of your videos, Ant, because I think that You're Not Broken, You've Been Hijacked is actually something that people should listen to as it's almost like something quite meditative that they could listen to, just because it's just, you're free flowing. Talk to people about it. Just to say, by the way, when I saw the title, I was like, that's interesting, because I used to tell my daughter, you're not spoiled, you're pampered, because spoiled suggests you're broken. I'm not having that. You're just somebody that I want to pamper, right? And it's kind of like a similar play on words that you're going through. So talk to us. I think that's it sums up so much. And I think that some of our viewers are also going through very difficult times. Spiritual awakenings are very, very difficult. You can feel incredibly isolated. There are people in the comments talking about, how they've been isolated by their families and they don't no longer have any friends or anything. So talk to us about You're Not Broken, You've Been Hijacked. Brilliant title. It's I know people like you were saying there, people are struggling. Spiritual awakenings are very, very, very tough. And I mentioned that in the presentation the other day, actually. I said, you think that spiritual awakening is going to be fantastic, that you're all just going to find peace and go, woo, I'm here. And it's not. It's painful. It's lonely. It's a treacherous road that you're placed on, and you've got to find your way. And it's quite, you're alone with that. But we are hijacked. We are very hijacked in terms of the conditioning that we're placed under. But my channel is not for everyone. But I recognize that as a niche, because it delves into the fact that we have a dark consciousness on this realm as well. I'm looking at all aspects. I'm looking at the fact, yes, there's controllers in this realm, politically, social, whatever. But what's controlling them? And why are they so greedy? Why are they so in need of power? Why are they in so need of keeping us trodden down? Right.
So I want to try and explore all these aspects. And you see, even during C19, you can see that they use dates. They would use the solstices. They use rituals and et cetera, et cetera. So all this is used against us. So I've gone quite Gnostic in some aspects of my channel recently, why that potentially we have a demiurge. We're living in a carbon copied kind of realm, if you like, that's taken us away from the true source creator, which is an interesting topic to dive into. And also Wetiko as well, things like that, where a parasitic mind virus that's making people become narcissists. That
fascinating
Castaneda and Don Juan were talking about as the predators that are changing humanity, and we've got to be careful how we think. So we've got to return back to our true essence, which is heart, the heart mind.
It is the heart, and it is also hard because there are so many obstacles to, going back to what I said before, and that is we've literally been put into a system which was designed to take us away from our personalities. I was very fortunate with my mum, with my family. I grew up with a family of hippies. We were like the crazy family in a village in Gloucestershire, and I'm so great. At the time I felt really like isolated and quite ashamed that I was like so lonely because other children didn't really want to play with me. They called my mum a witch. But now looking back, I'm like so grateful because it's made me who I am. I literally wouldn't change anything. And that is the reality. When you look back and when you're able to get that overview, you're able to go, I know exactly why that occurred. That created that for me. And even hardships and enemies and whatever, every single thing I now know has a purpose. And I think when you've reached that stage, then you're winning, because we are up against psychopaths. I mean, like true psycho and sociopaths who are running our world into the ground. They want to depopulate us, obviously, quite clearly. But I think it's really interesting. I love the topic of narcissism, by the way, because I think it's been so underexplored over the years. And obviously, it's now a very popular topic. But I have a theory, and I've talked to narcissists and psychiatrists about this, and it would appear that there's an inordinate amount of narcissists who are apparently running our world. Anne, is that your kind of take on it as well? They definitely seem to be up there, don't they?
Oh, they're not like you and I. No. This is the thing. This is one of the things. When I remember when I first brought 9/11 to my parents and saying, "Look, it's not what happened," and they said, "Well, but why would they do that to us, Anthony? Why would they do that?" And I like, but they're not like we are. They don't feel like we do. They're so taken away. So that's why I want to dive into the esoteric side of it. What is driving them? What's driving them? Is it just money, greed, and power? I know that's powerful in itself, but there's something more going on.
Yeah,
it's deeper. It's deeper than that.
It is deeper. Do you think, though, that it can also be simplified, that it can be broken down to good versus evil? Can it be broken down to that, do you think?
Well, it's duality. There's a duality playing out in this realm that we're in, isn't there? For sure. And I do feel that there's darkness in each of us as well. The shadow work that I had to do. I had to recognize the fact that I'm not 100% pure. Right. I'm a human being, and I can get thoughts coming in that they're not mine at the best of times. It's like, where are those thoughts coming from? When I'm like planning to end the whole thing, what's that? Where's that come from? Because I'm here to love. I'm not here to cause chaos and whatever. But you can get chaotic moments in your own life. So these people are lost up at the top end, aren't they? Completely.
They are. I'm just looking at this comment, by the way. I don't know if you heard it. And Randy's right. When I said evil, it made a really weird noise. Did you hear it down the between me and you? It was so weird. Listen to it back if it's captured. It was weird, but Randy caught it and I caught it. I was like, "Ooh, I don't want to interrupt Anne, but that's weird." That was interesting. And if I were to describe you to somebody, what would be an accurate way of describing you?
God, I don't know.
And that is exactly why I asked it. And here's why. Because what I've discovered in my life, and I would suspect that I'm somewhat older than you, and so a slightly longer road, although only a physical road. Obviously, our spiritual journeys are something else altogether. But what I've discovered is that people who tend to be quite pure of heart often have difficulty boosting themselves up in any way, right? It's not on their agenda. Whereas we are literally led by people, and especially in the age of branding, where people can tell you what they're selling before they can tell you what they're actually doing. Right. And you can't do that. And I realized that in that instant. And I think that's quite an insight into someone's character. But I do like to give people the last say around here. So, Anne, what would you like people to take away about you?
Can I mention also that I've just
mention whatever you want.
I've just finished a book that's being proofread by Gaynor actually at the moment, and it's called The Great Deception, and it's literally about what we went through in 2020. I want to get it down on paper because I don't trust the fact that our history gets completely wiped out, and as we come more into the digital age, it's easy to wipe things out. I'm fully aware of the Library of Alexandria and the fact that the book burnings do happen, but this is important for me. So I've pieced something together, hopefully that people will be able to see how they did it, and how maybe we can not allow it to happen again. But in terms of the final word, I want people to realize how so incredibly special they are. We are incredibly special. The powers that be want us to keep us from not realizing our true potential. We are creators, we are wonderful, and we are special. And please just feel free to come and have a look at the channel if you want, and come to the website Yeah, no, I appreciate the time with you, Sonia. I've been very much looking forward to it, and I admire you a great deal.
Thank you.
And yeah, thank you so much.
Absolute pleasure. You reached backwards slightly as if you have your manuscript by your side, do you? Because if you do,
No,
I'm very observant.
I've got it here though. It's on my Word document here.
Oh, right.
Actually.
Okay, fine. No, absolutely fine. Because I wanted to lift it up so that we could visualize it. But because now you've now put it out into the ether. You've now let the universe know that this is happening. And people are already saying we actually do need documented records of what's taken place. We definitely do, because we know we're not going to get it at the COVID-19 inquiry. That is fact. So listen, Anne, absolute pleasure to have you with us this morning. Love your vibe. Really brilliant. And I wish you nothing but good things. I think this is a really important journey that you're taking, everybody. This is Ant Critchley, and he's from the Stellifi channel and website. And I think I've already put the links in the description. Lovely to have you with us. Thank you, Ant.
Thank you, Sonia. Take care.
Have a beautiful weekend. Lovely.
You too. You too.
What a darling soul. What a darling soul. Thank you, Gaynor, and your mum for recommending Ant. What an absolute wonderful top bloke. Top bloke, yes, Marcus, and top bloke. You're a good soul, Ant, says Jackie, who it didn't escape my notice. She dashed off to get whatever pastries and coffee. Send some back for me, Jack. Let's have a look at some of your messages. Thank you, Kath, for your super chat. And Jackie says, can we get some merch with investigative woo-woo as per Hunting Swan's suggestion, please? Hunting Swan, did you suggest that? I rather like that, actually. I must admit, I do rather like that. And did I see that it's the Blue Nomad's birthday today? Did I get that right or wrong, or just a 23rd in general? Cara wants to know if have you more offers today from MSM now that you are independent? No, well, it's interesting because they obviously still ask me. I refuse every single invite without fail, but I wouldn't say I necessarily have more. I've always had a steady stream, always. And I just love it. And I'm getting more and more creative in my rejections. My favorite one still is on saying no to Piers Morgan, that I would rather eat my own head. And the producer came back and said, we love that. Please, can you come on? We need somebody who's feisty. And I'm like, no. I loathe Piers Morgan. I'm not coming onto his show. And what else? Take charge of your life in case the universe is busy. I love that. Total utter nutter. I love that. That's lovely. And how are we all? All you have to do is I do not consent. We have to keep saying that. You can't subscribe to Christ and be a predator of people, says Benny. I don't know what that's about, but I got you. And Blue Nomad, did we ascertain whether it's your birthday, lass? And what have we got here? Oh yes, is it? Wait, yes, happy birthday. Right. And Sally said, been calling things out for at least 15 years, was originally told that I needed a tinfoil hat. I really wish I had been wrong back then. I know, Poppet, right? Lovely man, Ant, they're saying. Birthday blessings to Blue Nomad. Happy birthday. And they're not human, KB. Morgan, actually, Ray JR, who got to #1 commenter today, got there first, says Morgan is just a modern day shock jock. He really is. Finger in the air. Which way is it blowing? That's his kind of gig. Oh, the Blue Nomad. It's not my birthday. See, this is what happens. This is what happens, kid. Well, happy birthday for when it is your birthday, because there is a birthday sometime, right? And how Randy wants to know, how do you unhappy a birthday greeting? Oh, it's in July the 23rd. So you're cuspy Leo, right? Are we both Leos? Well, I'm a Leo. Happy birthday at the Blue Nomads. Jenny, I think we're getting it all horribly wrong here. Right. Let's move on to something that needs to be tackled. And this is horrible and gives me no pleasure in tackling this story whatsoever. It's going to take me a little while to work through it. It is the horrific and sad story of Beth Martin. I think I need to bring in some imagery here. Let me just breathe. And I want to take away all distractions from the screen so I can just focus on Beth and Luke and their family. I don't know whether you've heard about them. I was contacted yesterday morning by lovely Susanna, who is a brilliant contributor to Wake Up and has assisted me with mugs before. And she contacted me and she said, did you hear about Beth? She's one of us. And I was like, is that the story where they're talking about organ harvesting? And then I read it. And then Susanna carried on sending me stuff throughout the day, including videos. And I got increasingly angry and petrified for this family and the experience that they had endured. And I'm going to work through it with you because it's a horrendous story. And so what it essentially is Beth died while on holiday in Turkey, and the hospital removed her heart without the family's knowledge. So what is going on here? What is going on here? And I mean, as I say, yesterday I'd vaguely heard about it. And what Susanna was really saying about Beth was that she was a truth seeker, someone who was questioning and challenging the powers that be. And the story that I'm about to tell is utterly horrific and maybe triggering to some, but it's a story that needs to be told because a family and friends need our support and they need answers. So Beth and her husband, Luke, and their two children, just 8 and 5 years old, were on a family holiday in Turkey recently. Beth mysteriously became delirious. She was rushed to hospital. She was quickly placed into critical care, but she tragically passed away around a day after. And you will see as I work through this why I can't be more certain about times and dates, because there's a real problem. But we do know that she was first admitted to hospital on April the 28th. And Beth's family were kept in the dark about the seriousness of her condition and her subsequent death, with her husband, Luke, even being accused of poisoning her by the Turkish authorities. But there was more horrors to come. As I've said, the UK autopsy then revealed that Beth's heart had been removed after she passed away in Turkey. And it also reported that the hospital where Beth was treated is now being investigated for potential negligence amid a raft of claims leveled against them. A GoFundMe was set up by Robert Hammond, a friend of the family. And this is for legal costs. This is to help the family. And if I haven't already put a link in the description, I will after the show. And I want to work through what was said there, because I think the chances are this is a much more realistic and honest account of what has taken place rather than what may come out via legacy media or via the authorities. And it's interesting because the GoFundMe begins with something that I think many of us can relate to. And that is, we want to begin by saying that, like many others with a great sense of pride and the classically strong British resolve, that asking for money from family, friends and strangers on a public platform is not something that's taken lightly. If anyone reading this is facing financial difficulty, or if this story doesn't connect with you, please at the very least share this by any means necessary. Share on social media, talk about it at work, at the pub, anywhere. And that is exactly why I'm here talking about it and why I'm going to dedicate some time to unraveling this today. And as they said, the story is long. The details are horrific beyond belief. I was stunned reading much of it, but they are, as we understand them, that Luke and his wife Beth and their two young children flew to Turkey on Sunday, the 27th of April. It was intended, obviously, to be a fabulous family holiday. And less than a week later, the children returned, and then Luke returned with his dead wife. It's horrendous. And what happened was, during the night, in the early hours of Monday, the 28th of April, 2025, Beth was feeling unwell. She managed to get a little bit of sleep. She became delirious. Luke at this point had tried contacting various doctors and hospitals, but was told that no one could come out till 10 a.m. when they start. Luke eventually managed, despite the clear language barriers that he was dealing with, he managed to get an ambulance, and Beth was taken to hospital. Luke followed behind in a taxi with their two young children in tow. A situation like this is horrendous at any time, but being on holiday with two young children in tow, I cannot imagine what Luke must have been going through, and obviously poor Beth. And Beth at this point was said to be not herself. She was scared. The language barriers made everything much worse. The children naturally traumatized. What is happening with mummy? There were no explanations. There was no understanding of what was taking place. And obviously, Luke had no choice at that point but to trust that the doctors were doing the right thing by his wife, as you would, as I think most people would in that situation. And obviously, Luke, unable to leave his children, called both grandmothers to fly out from England to help. Thankfully, a kind stranger assisted Luke, befriended them on the plane, and this person made their way to the hospital, stayed with Beth so that Luke could get the children back to the hotel in an attempt to avoid further trauma. Then it just goes so much, like, you cannot believe the catalogue of events that then follow, but I'm going to share them with you. Luke was essentially banned from seeing his wife. Beth was moved into intensive care. Her condition by now was critical, and Luke was literally banned from seeing her. From there were no calls, no updates. Despite him trying to contact the hospital to see if his wife was okay, all he was met with was just silence. By the Tuesday, the grandmums had arrived. Beth was transferred, and they were frantically searching for Beth. Where had she been transferred to? They struggled deeply. The grandparents went to the hospital. By this point, Beth had been returned to the hospital. So really weird stuff going on. And Beth had been transferred overnight. And actually, when the grandparents arrived at the hospital she was originally at, she wasn't there, right? Beth was then transferred back to the original hospital. They said that there were concerns with her heart. And Luke, her husband, had been told that Beth had been moved during the night due to this. And as far as Luke was concerned, that was all they knew. However, later in the story, it will make absolute sense as to why this is also critical, not least what I've already told you. Okay. Then Beth's own mum was restricted from seeing her own daughter. I don't know about you, but as a mother, I have no idea what I would do in such a situation. You'd literally want to just tear the walls down, wouldn't you? Hearing that your daughter is in a critical, dire state and you can't even be with her. And this was after the grandparents had to go through this, by all accounts, a very dilapidated, falling down hospital. They eventually found Beth's room. And this, of course, is now a mother wanting to see her very sick daughter. The primal instinct for wanting to do that would be so great. It would be horrendous to be prevented. And they were, for hours, led astray. You know, soon, for hours and hours and hours, it continued. And by now, there is now chaos at the hotel. Absolute chaos. Turkish police arrived to interrogate Luke. There was no translator, and the hotel staff were forced to act as intermediaries through significantly broken communication. Luke was made to sign a document without knowing it, but it was later translated that the statement actually read that Beth had died around 9 a.m., but he didn't know that, because it was a foreign document. He'd heard nothing from the hospital regarding this, was constantly texting and calling his mum, asking if they had been allowed to see her yet. And now he's a suspect in the death of his wife. And he doesn't even know if she's dead, because he's been given a document that he doesn't understand and told to sign. This is a textbook horror story. Absolutely. They specifically believed that he had poisoned her, and the hospital gave the grandmummies Beth's belongings. The grandmothers didn't know that Beth was dead, although they gave. I actually feel like crying hearing this. They gave the grandmothers Beth's wedding ring. And that just, I think, speaks volumes. I mean, symbolically, it's, I think, really profound. And still, they were being constantly told that they could see her in 5 more minutes. So neither the grandmothers nor Luke really know that Beth is now dead, according to the hospital. This is unbelievable. Eventually, Beth's mum was allowed in to see her daughter, and Beth was cold. And I mean, it's all horrendous. Yes, it is absolutely horrendous, but there's more, and I do feel it's important for us to talk about this. Absolutely vital and important. So they went back to comfort Luke. Obviously horrendous. Luke is a suspect. Beth is dead. She's been transferred backwards and forwards to hospitals. They've not been told the whereabouts of the daughter. They didn't even know for hours that Beth was dead. Horrendous. You know, it smells and sounds off, people. You know it as well as I do. And then on top of that, the doctors asked if Beth had any allergies. Luke had already told the paramedics when Beth got in the ambulance that she was allergic to penicillin. And yet, when they told this again to the doctor, they were shocked. The doctor was apparently shocked to hear this information. They had no idea and had been treating Beth for hours at this point. There was so much confusion that was reigning at the hospital. When Luke eventually confirmed it, it was essentially hours later. And yet he'd been forced to sign this document. It's absolutely awful. And then you start to hear some of the details, the breakdown of the details, such as, yes, they were insured, by the way, and they should have had a private hospital. And a private hospital came through just shortly before Beth died. And that in itself, I think, is horrendous. But on top of that, the family were faced with a situation where they were in the hospital and the hospital were demanding £2,000 before Luke and Beth's mum could even see Beth, right? I can't get my head around this. I can't get around it. These are grieving parents. The hospital staff know that there is a dead daughter inside. They're demanding £2,000 because obviously the insurance isn't covering them for this hospital. It's horrendous. And then as I say, there is sadly more that it's awful. Back at the hotel, the police arrive again and they insist that they will be burying Beth, right? Luke obviously strongly said that is not going to happen, right? We're taking her home. But the police said, no, we're burying her, right? And they told Luke to return to the hospital at 8 a.m. to be interviewed by a prosecutor. By this point, the children still did not know that their mummy had died. And Luke was, as you can imagine, absolutely reeling. He's lost his partner, his loved one, his soulmate, and he's being accused of it. So there was a second interview with Luke, and it's horrible but necessary as most. And here's the thing, right? Just to say, is I completely get why the police would have turned to him first. That it's horrible, but it is actually a necessary part of the process because most women who are killed by their partners, right? That is a reality. But what he went through sounds like he was facing something of a firing squad, right? He waited hours in the back of a van in the hospital car park. By now, this is Tuesday, Wednesday. This is Wednesday, 30th of April. The chief investigator sat at a desk, bolted into the vehicle, and surrounding him were police officers armed with guns. This doesn't sound like they were just interviewing Luke. This sounds like an interrogation. This sounds like a firing squad. The bloke is traumatized. And then after all that, they ruled there was no further action. The crowdfunder describes Luke as being broken beyond repair. You can imagine, can't you? Right? Luke begged to see his wife. He said, I cooperated fully. He begged. He was sobbing to see his wife. And he was eventually allowed to see her in the morgue for 1 minute. 1 minute, no more. The staff were over his shoulder watching his every move. Yet he couldn't even have a moment alone with his wife. Sarah, I have to agree. I believe that there is a cover-up taking place here. So this is really horrendous, really horrendous. Beth's mum, by the way, was treated with similar hostility. She was allowed to see her daughter, but it was under strict instructions. You must wash your hands. You must not touch her. You must not even kiss her. And yet again, the staff were over her shoulder. She couldn't even embrace her dead daughter's body. This is the part that when I got to it yesterday, I actually broke down and sobbed. So excuse me if I cry right now, because I think this is actually horrendous what they've been through. Luke and the grandparents were then given Beth's body in a body bag to carry away. And throughout this story, I kept thinking this can't be true. This cannot have happened. And yet it did to a young family. It's horrific. And so they were given Beth's body in a zipped body bag. They had to take a corner of the bag each. They had to shift her corpse. I can't actually comprehend what this family have had to endure. And as they were doing that, the translator was with them carrying Beth in her body bag. And when they were waiting by the elevator, the translator, according to them, was tapping on the body bag like you would tap on a case or something. And it's like Beth's body is in there, right? Beth's body is in there. And they got this feeling that like the translator was impatient, as if they were late for a meeting. Queen Bee is unreal, but I feel the need to describe it as much as I humanly can. I really do. There are no words, Shug. And this is not the end of the trauma and the heartache, far from it. The travel insurance then said it could take 2 weeks or longer to bring Beth home. Luke refused. He paid thousands on top of what he'd already paid for scans, taxes, hospital fees, translator hotels, repatriation arrangements, transcribing documents, notaries, the list goes on. Okay. And frankly, and I don't know who the insurers were, but that sounds like a whole other area where compensation and much more is due. And it was on Saturday, the 3rd of May, that Luke finally told his children that mummy had gone. Now, that is pure heartbreak for any parent to have to tell that to their child. And I cannot imagine what he will have gone through. It's absolutely horrendous. And the children and the family flew home on the Sunday. Luke stayed in Turkey to fly back with Beth's body on Tuesday, the 6th of May. Since then, absolutely battered and bruised. And they are a shell of themselves, as you can imagine. And the final crushing blow is what we've already talked about, and that is the UK autopsy began, and then they discovered that Beth's heart was missing. Beth's heart was missing. The Turkish hospital, it appears, had removed it. No explanation, no consent. They literally invaded her body and took her heart. I don't think it gets much more profound than having a heart stolen from your body, right? And as they said and I don't know if this was the crowdfunder or whether this was Luke's words, but I'm going to quote it directly, her heart, the piece of Beth that was more treasured than any other, the piece of her that stopped for a moment when she heard her children's first words, the piece of her that skipped a beat when she said, I do at her wedding, the piece of her that pumped around with pride whenever she was with her family. And of course, now the family are fighting back. Luke has spent absolutely thousands. As I mentioned at the start and throughout this, there is a GoFundMe. I think I've already put the link in the description. Luke is self-employed, meaning he's not back to work and he needs time to grieve, but they also need money for the legal case. They absolutely do. These people are grieving. They are traumatized, and they're now trying to put the pieces of their family back together again. And after everything the family have been through, Luke believes passionately that this is something that cannot be taken lying down. Absolutely. And this is exactly why I'm covering this story. It is excruciating in detail. And please donate. If you are able, please donate. That is a bereaved family. And they need as much help as possible. So what has gone on here, folks? What has gone on here? Well, I looked into it. Do you know? And I'm at this moment in time, obviously making no accusations against the hospital because I simply don't know. But I think that it would be remiss of me in covering this story not to look at the trade in organ trading and organ harvesting and see where it is in terms of Turkey. Well, do you know that in terms of Turkey, it actually is the country that has one of the highest transplant rates in the world, 61.5 for every million inhabitants. And that was as of 2023, which is compared to a global average of 25.84. So that's significant. Turkey is right up there in terms of transplants. And that there is an illegal trade in transplants, and organs fetch a huge amount of money on the black market. And in fact, going even further, there was a 2017 report by Global Financial Integrity, which suggested that hearts could fetch between, 130 to $290,000. So in sterling, it would be about 96,000 to 216,000, with lungs worth a similar amount. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with Ellie Gray. Ellie Gray is the health influencer. She is a good friend of Beth. She flew out to Turkey to try to get Beth home. Beth died while Ellie was there. And Ellie did a Facebook video, said they don't know how Beth died, because at this moment in time, there's an autopsy with a missing heart. How can you do a full autopsy when there's a missing heart? Now, just to say, I'm sure there will be some people who will say, not necessarily in our comments, there'll be some people who are saying, do Turkey have any legal right to do this? No, actually, I don't think so. Because under Turkish law, coroners can take small tissue samples and organs for testing without the family's permission. However, the idea is that it's only in exceptional circumstances that body parts might be kept without permission. Well, that in itself is problematic, right, as a clause. But generally, the idea is that organs are normally returned to the body when the person's body is released. And what was the business of moving her backwards and forwards, right, to hospitals and not allowing her loved ones to see her and not allowing her loved ones to touch her? What was all that about, right? So we know absolutely, unquestionably, there is a profit in organ harvesting, and Turkey is right up there. And I want to play you a video. Great question, where was the British consulate in this whole scenario? Welcome, Gwyneth. Right, Girl on Fire says they can't say she was having heart problems when she was moved and then take the organ for donation. DP, I think that we are looking at the potential for a black market dealing here. So they don't know how she died. No, they've no idea. She had an autopsy in Istanbul, which they've been told will take about 6 months to get the results. Then obviously she was repatriated to the UK, and the UK autopsy then declared that they cannot find a cause of death, obviously. So it'll have to go to an inquest, which is suspected to be around November. And one of the things that Ellie says in her video, and I'm not going to play the whole thing, it's like 5-6 minutes long, but I am going to play an excerpt from it because I think it's important. And one of the things that Ellie says was that actually Beth was unwell before she left, and she was unwell on the flight. They wondered if it was a dodgy takeaway. And the clip I'm going to show you is, let me just reload it because I don't want it to fail coming in here, is where Ellie is talking about the hospital claimed that they did CPR, which is obviously trying to revive her, that they did CPR on Beth for 45 minutes. Now, Ellie eventually saw Beth in the morgue, and this is the clip where Ellie is talking about it. And this, I think, is of great interest to Wake Up viewers and something we must be aware of, because this is a first-hand witness account of something from somebody who knew her well. So let me just bring this in. Again, trigger warning if necessary. Sorry, let me just find it. Here we go. There it is. This is Ellie Gray.
They said that they did 45 minutes of CPR. Anyone who's ever had CPR or seen CPR knows how brutal it is. When I saw Beth, when I saw her, when she was in the morgue afterwards, she had her hair, she had them in 2 French plaits. And they were perfect. They were perfect. There is no way that they did CPR for 45 minutes. I know that. I was unfortunate enough to have it years and years ago. And I know the state and how harsh they have to push. The bed covers everything. It's just not... Her hair was perfect.
I mean, I don't know where that hits you in your solar plexus. It hit me. Her hair was perfect. I've seen CPR. It is horrendously rough procedure. And Vanessa said that would break the ribs. I think Ellie's first person account is really, really important. Markuson makes an important comment, and that is you can't transplant a dead heart. That's an important comment. And I get it. It is rough watching. And I'm sorry. And I'm sorry that we have to do this, but I feel the need to, because this family need justice. Beth Martin went on holiday and she never came back alive. And she came back in, you know, in such a way that her body was incomplete, and her family deserve answers. They deserve answers. So yes, I believe that the hospital is currently under investigation. The British government need to do more, as people are saying in the comments. And sadly, I feel there is so much more to this. Very sadly, I want to send out so much love to the Martin family and all of the loved ones and all the friends. A link to the fundraiser, I hope I've already put in the description. As I say, I will put it in at the end of the show if I need to. Not at all, Jack, needs to be done. Absolutely needs to be done. Right, thank you. Rest in peace, Beth Martin. May you and your family get some justice in this horrendous situation. Okay, beautiful people. Right, where am I up to? Where am I up to? I want to slightly actually. Oh no, let me just reflect on this before we start to aim for a close here. Although we're going to go on slightly longer. There is no words, Simon. Absolutely no words. It's a very painful story, KB, and I make no apologies for saying it, because that is what we face that kind of stuff, right? We face those difficult stories. But I cried many times yesterday reading it, and had a little cry here now because it's just so wrong. 2 children are now motherless. Her husband is wifeless, and her life is gone. Horrible. Thank you, Mads. Rest in peace. Okay. I want to talk about another injustice, or kind of like a conference about an injustice. Last Saturday at the University of Bristol was the Empowering the Innocent conference, organised by Dr. Michael Norton alongside writer Sean Parker. And both these men have been on Wake Up before. In fact, Michael Norton has been on with us a few times talking about miscarriages of justice. He's devoted 25 years more now, I don't doubt, to exploring miscarriages of justice, wrongful convictions of people, and imprisonment of innocent victims. And they had a conference last week, and there was an array of speakers. These included veteran false allegation activist Margaret Gardner. She runs the Falsely Accused Support Organisation. And there was Dr. Ellen Storm, who talked about the justice system needing to have a duty of candour. Absolutely, unquestionably. And Nikki Rowley of the Jeremy Bamber Innocence Campaign, she spoke about the multiple applications to the CCRC, which is obviously the body which decides if a criminal conviction can be appealed. And obviously the CCRC is problematic. We've heard that. It's been implicated in miscarriages of justice itself. There was also the rather brilliant Ava Vidal. I've been talking to Ava recently. I think she's a brilliant, strong comedian. And she talked about this insane situation where she was kind of like pulled in as a witness in a false allegation of rape. Now, can you imagine that? Somebody was trying to get her to say that she had witnessed this rape that had never taken place. And then Ava ended up being the target of this person's attention. And it's a really powerful story. And I want to be able to bring Ava on one day and talk about it. It's really funny because when we started talking, we both recalled being on Russia Today, where we've been set against each other in a debate. And then we ended up actually getting on really well. And I think she's a brilliant, formidable woman. And her story is really important and needs to be told. And there was also Anne Doherty. She's a former Italian barrister. She's a legal professional from Spoken Injustice. And I'm going to play a brief clip of Anne. Because I think this is an important one. Let me just bring in Anne's clip. And I think this kind of sums up really what the aim of the day was. And also a lot of the time, those events are about camaraderie, and it was very much focused on women either supporting men who have been falsely accused or women who've been falsely accused, but I think it served a really important purpose. Let me bring in Anne Doherty, who kind of sums it all up.
The underwear that I sent him in.
What on earth is that? That is not what I wanted to bring on. Let me find her. That's about a whole other story that I'm going to be covering, but not today. Where is it? Where are you? Bear with me, peeps. You know what I'm like. I do my best. Here she is. Have a listen.
Wrongful convictions and false allegations don't just break individuals. They fracture families, destroy trust, and shake our collective belief in fairness, truth, and justice. Some of us in this room have lived that nightmare. Others have stood by those who did. But I believe we're here today because we think silence is no longer an option. Today is about speaking up.
And she's absolutely right. Today is about speaking up. This is the second Empowering the Innocents conference. And given what they are planning to do in prison reforms, this is needed now more than ever. And as you can see, there was a poster about Robin Garbutt in the background. We've covered Robin's story again. Really problematic story. If you're not familiar with it, I urge you to actually, I'll put in the description Dr. Michael Norton's website so you can read up on all of these important stories. Well, what a fantastic Friday. We have awakened. The underwear story, which I need to look up more to double fact check, but essentially it is a mum saying that her autistic son went to nursery, came home in different clothes and talked about being in the basement with a man. But I'm still fact checking it. So it's a mad story. Absolutely mad story. Right, beautiful people. Not much that I wanted to say about Chrissy Tegan. I said I'd probably go into her in detail today. Not really. Two of the most obnoxious women around have come together. I really didn't want to dislike Meghan Markle. I really didn't, because the type of people who dislike her, I can't stand. I don't want to be on the same side of them. But she is actually, I find her really insufferable and just pretentious. It's not really my gig at all. But she's now got season 2 coming up on Netflix. And one of her earliest guests already recorded is the equally reprehensible Chrissy Tegan. I don't know if you're familiar with Chrissy Tegan. She's an American model, television personality, author. She has been accurately criticized for being an online bully towards a 16-year-old girl at one stage and other people, a grown woman. Get a grip. She's really weird. She says weird stuff. She said weird stuff about children. Infamously, she did lots of tweeting about toddlers and tiaras. One example was seeing little girls do the splits half naked is just, I want to put myself in jail. Just weird stuff. Thank you, Beverly. Thank you for joining us. Thank you. She's weird, super weird, super weird. And the only thing I want to say about Chrissy Tegan is, and this is for people who may not remember her history, but she posted a picture in 2020, and it was a devastating picture. Although there were people who were like, "Why would you do a photo shoot at this point?" And she sat on the edge of a bed, and the idea is that she's just lost her baby. She's just had a miscarriage. And I'm sure many of you have seen this picture, but I'm just going to bring it out again, not because I'm a bad human being, but because I want to make an important point about this. So this was the picture that was posted. And as you can see, absolutely devastating, although it does look like a set up photo shoot. But what we discovered several years later was she didn't have a miscarriage. She had an abortion. That's who Chrissy Tegan is. She has an abortion, then posts a picture like that for social media sympathy. And yes, she had a cake made with the placenta. She did that as well. She's weird. KB says, can we have some happier stories? Yes, we can, which is what I'm going to finish on. So I just want to say, if you see her rock up, she's a lunatic, absolute lunatic. And I have no idea why John Legend married her. He must be a lunatic as well. Okay, happier stories, happier stories. First of all, to Ian and Wendy Richardson, you sent me a recording of Birdsong from Northamptonshire this morning, but it wouldn't play. Please send it again. I'd love to play that on Monday, but I want to do something much, much happier. She's odd fox, super odd. And she's basically like a Kardashian. They're weird people. These Hollywood people are weird as anything. Weird. Could be. Karma Kitty will not be watching her. But will you be watching Mrs. Pirate's B? I think it's Wednesday show or Monday show. Mrs. Pirate was talking about how she had a slow motion video of a bumblebee on her parents' poppy. That's something nicer, isn't it? Let's watch that. Let's watch that. Because I think we always, at the end of the show, we need to do something altogether much nicer. This is beautiful. Ready? I don't think it's playing a sound, but it's fine. Sorry, Mrs. Pirate, it's not playing a sound, which is odd. But look at that. Look at that, magnificent. Look at it. Busy at work. I love it. Mrs. Pirate, I'm sorry it's not playing a sound, but thank you so much for sending it in. This is the stuff. This is the stuff. That's a fantastic video. That is a fantastic video. You're welcome, Natasha. But we have to have some good stuff to end with, don't we? Lovely Bumble. Absolutely lovely. Love it. Thank you so much. Be kind, says Markuson. Indeed. Which brings me to the kindness of our donators. Thank you all so much. Thank you to my patrons at Patreon. Thank you to the super chatters. You are wonderful. Thank you to Helena. Thank you to Valerie, who also sent me a book and included a contribution. You're an absolute darling and a star. Thank you to Ashley P, to Claire D, to Andy M, to David B, to Stuart R, to Merv W, to Young Linda, to F Young, and to M Taylor. You people are all stars. You really are. And I appreciate you, Lee. I appreciate you greatly. I really do. And now on to our last thought, darling people. And that is, a year ago today, I sat in front of you on this screen and I live streamed on YouTube for the first time ever. I had never done it before, right? And I basically had no clue what I was doing, which kind of continues half the time, right? And it wasn't the start of Wake Up. That was to come the following week. No, this was the end of my old broadcasting life as I knew it. It was me drawing a line in the sand. That was it. No more. I was done with doing things the way other people wanted me to do them. And it was time for me, even within the boundaries of YouTube, to do my own thing. And so I want to end today's show with that thing that many of us find very difficult to do. And that is to end one chapter in order to be able to begin another. Even if it's a bad chapter, even if it's difficult, sometimes there is comfort in the devil we know. And it can be hard to let go. I get that. I really do. But I want to talk about letting go and how to do it if you feel stuck, because the bottom line is this: you cannot have a new beginning until you relinquish the old and experience an ending. And this is how I did it. I thought long and hard about it, right? I weighed up the pros and cons. I waited and I waited. And then I reached a point where it was like, there's no time like the present, right? And part of the reason was because I was pushed, right? And sometimes people need to be pushed. After 3 decades working in broadcasting and journalism, I got the trigger. I needed to finally go solo and answer to no one, right? An answer to no one, except, of course, as I say, the requirements of streaming on here in the first place. But for the most part, being my own boss. And the trigger that I needed was censorship and control. As many of you know, I was the breakfast show host at TNT, Today's News Talk. They brought me in, they paid me a good wage, and then told me not to talk about geoengineering and child abuse. And they only said that after I started working for them, by the way. Over the kind of 5 months that I endured the place, I tried every which way to work with them, get them to expand what they were covering, but it wasn't to be. There were numerous issues at TNT, as many know. I made a video about it, and not least a clear dislike of women in broadcasting. In fact, I was the only weekday female to have my own show. There were only 3 women on camera when I was there. Right. It was almost like the owners had this idea of me, right, and the audience that I brought with me, but they thought that they could mold and shape me, which was a pretty rotten idea for anybody who actually knows me. Right. So that was it for me. Over. Finito. And it wasn't just TNT. That was the point when I really realized I was sick and tired of being sick and tired and working to other people's agendas, right? It was clear, absolutely, for me to bid farewell. But it was painful because this is the world that I knew, not just TNT, but working in broadcasting, working in teams, working with other people saying, can you talk about this? Suddenly it was me deciding my own road. And it was really wonderful. I loved it. And I want to share with you some of the tips for ending if you have found yourself in a space where it is difficult, right? So This whole idea, when one chapter closes, obviously it signifies the end of a significant period or event in someone's life, and it's often followed by the beginning of a new one. But I absolutely know, without a shadow of a doubt, you cannot start afresh without ending the old. You can't. There isn't the space, or like psychologically or spiritually or physically or even the time of the day. Sometimes you have to release the old in order to make way for the new, and that is a reality. And so, as I say, one of the things I did was I weighed up all the pros and cons of it. I thought about it, and sometimes you are triggered into it. Sometimes you've worked out you can no longer work with that person or work under those circumstances, and triggers can do it. But if you are deciding of your own volition that you want to end one chapter and start another, there are ways around doing it. And some of them, of course, is if you're nervous, do simple stuff like write pros and cons of starting a new chapter and think what this old chapter meant to you, but what you can't achieve if you carry on holding on to it, right? You can't carry baggage from the old into your new. You simply can't. And this can apply to anything. This can apply to relationships. This can apply to jobs. This can apply to projects, right? You've got to be able to move on. And with as light a load as possible. I think I actually saw somebody in the comments earlier talk about how we come into this world with nothing. We leave with nothing. Well, make your journey light equally. You don't need to be carrying old baggage from old scenarios along with you. No, you don't. Absolutely, you don't. And so I think that sometimes people get an awakening about ending the old and beginning the new, and sometimes people are pushed, and either way works. Really, it does. Natasha, do not be scared, my darling. Do not be scared. We're here with you. And KB said, hey chat, love you all. We love those sort of vibes. Absolutely. And Ian thinks women are actually victims of their so-called empowerment. Do you think so, Ian? I don't feel like a victim. I feel very empowered. I feel empowered right down to my fingertips, and I don't feel like a victim at all. But I acknowledge what you're saying. I do. And reinvent yourself is the only way. Milford, it is. Reinvent yourself and keep doing it until you're happy. And the funny thing is that the more you reinvent yourself, the chances are you're going to get closer to who you really are. Because remember, what we talked about with Ant today, and that is you have to unpack, what the world has put on you, what your education has taught you, all those barriers and boundaries to finding out who you really are. So there we are, people. Shug said, just be yourself, drop all the ego and be honest with yourself. Absolutely. And I just want to say thank you to all of you for being here today. Love you lots. Wonderful chat today. And wherever you're watching us, whether you're watching us live or on playback, thank you for being here. I truly, truly appreciate you. It's bank holiday, I think, on Monday, and I will still be here with you folks. Yes, I will. And I want to end on a quote, because that's what we do around here. And that is, and suddenly, it's time to start something new and trust the magic of new beginnings. And there you have it, folks. Have a fantastic, fantastic weekend. And I will see you Monday. Love you loads and loads and loads. Take excellent, excellent care of yourself. Lots of love to you all, peeps. Love you.